The Narnian timeline is a rich and complex tapestry that spans thousands of years across multiple cultures, kingdoms, and continents. Add to that the fact that from trip to trip into Narnia there may be a difference of several hundred or even thousands of years, and it's no surprise that it can all get a bit complicated. And then there's the fact that there's a deeper lore that exists outside of the books, yet is considered just as canon as the books themselves. But in all this complexity, there's a beautiful, overarching simplicity written into the history of Narnia. Today, we're going to look at the 7 ages of Narnian history, and as we do, we'll talk about the defining characteristics of each age, take a look at some of the most important events and figures during that time, and sometimes some of the more obscure details, and finally, we'll talk about what it all means and why Narnian history was more than just happenstance. We've got several thousand years to cover here, so let's get started. It's time to leave the Shadowlands behind and step into a world that's more real than our own. It's time to follow me into the wardrobe. In the 7 ages of Narnia, there are only 2 that are technically defined by name in the books: the Golden Age and the Last Days. However, there's a distinct series of events that clearly mark and define each age, and over time, fans have given unofficial names to each of these ages. Now I want to take a second here and give credit where credit's due to the Narnia wiki at narnia.fandom.com. The editors there have done some fantastic work, and they've helped me immensely in putting together this episode. However, I also want to give you a bit of caution here. Many of the details in the wiki aren't actually in the books at all and can't be considered canon. Instead, they're more like elaborations that are closer to fan fiction than fact. And so I've chosen to only include the details in this timeline that are actually found in the books or in the official C.S. Lewis timeline. Now also, as we discuss these 7 ages, you may be assuming that there are 7 ages simply because there are also 7 books. And you might jump to the conclusion that each age just corresponds to one of the 7 books. However, you'd be mistaken. There are some eras in which multiple books take place, and then there are some time periods in which no recorded stories take place at all. You'll see what I mean soon enough, but for now, let's dive into the first era, the Age of Conquest. The first age began, of course, in the Narnian Year 1, when Aslan sang the whole universe into existence. The first ruler of Narnia was King Frank the Cabbie, who was accidentally teleported into Narnia along with Jadis, Andrew Ketterly, Diggory Kirk, Polly Plummer, Strawberry the Horse, and finally Frank's wife Helen, the first Queen of Narnia. During this time, nations sprang up and expanded, exploring and conquering many lands. This is the time frame when Prince Kor led a group of Narnians over the southern mountains, becoming the first king of Archenland. A century later, outlaws from Archenland crossed the Great Desert and established the Kingdom of Calormen. Calormen expanded rapidly during this time, but the Kingdom of Narnia expanded as well. In fact, this is when Narnia became an official empire under King Gale in the Narnian Year 302. It was King Gale who delivered the Lone Islanders from the terrible reign of a horrible dragon. In their gratitude, they made him their ruler, the first emperor of Narnia. Also during this time, pirates from our world stumbled through a hidden portal into Narnia and established the nation of Telmar. This is also the time of some legendary Narnian figures, including Moonwood the Hare, whose ears were so famed that it was said he could sit by Cauldron Pool under the thunder of the great waterfall and hear what men spoke in whispers at Cair Paravel. This was also the time of Swanwhite the Queen, who was so beautiful that when she looked into any forest pool, the reflection of her face shone out of the water like a star by night for a year and a day afterwards. Interestingly enough, this isn't the last time we'll hear of Queen Swanwhite. It was a busy time in the world of Narnia, but sadly in the year 898, the Tree of Protection died, allowing Jadis the White Witch to return to Narnia out of the far north, and eventually ushering in the next age, the Age of Winter. In the Narnian Year 900, Jadis famously cast Narnia under the spell of the Long Winter, which lasted for 100 years. It would radically transform Narnian life and culture. All humans were either banished from Narnia or executed. It was also a dark and hard time for the talking beasts of Narnia, as snow perpetually covered the ground and food was scarce. No doubt many Narnians died of starvation, and under the tyranny of the Queen, Narnian turned against Narnian. Friendships, families, and communities were destroyed as Narnians lost trust in one another. This was a time of geopolitical isolation for Narnia, when the Narnians were trapped behind the icy curtain of Jadis control, and other nations were too terrified of Jadis' power to even engage in diplomacy. Even Father Christmas was banned from breaking through Jadis' enchantment. In Narnia, it was always winter and never Christmas. The only glimmer of hope in this age of despair was the Golden Age prophecy, an ancient prophecy that foretold, when Adam's flesh and Adam's bones sits at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. And in the Narnian year 1000, that hope began to shine a little bit brighter as a new age was ushered in, the Golden Age. The Golden Age was preceded by the first appearance of humans in Narnia in at least 100 years, when the Pevinse siblings stumbled into Narnia through the legendary magical wardrobe. The children's presence coincided with the weakening of Jadis' spell at the end of the long winter. It was during this time that Aslan was taken by Jadis to be executed as a substitution for Edmund's treachery towards Narnia. It's also during this time that Aslan was resurrected from the dead, arguably marking the pinnacle moment of the Golden Age. The children fought alongside Aslan's army to liberate Narnia and defeat the White Witch at the First Battle of Baruna. After Jadis' death, the Pevinses were coronated as the kings and queens of Narnia and ruled from the 4 thrones in Cair Paravel. This was an age of restoration. Diplomatic relations were opened between Calormen, the alliance between Telmar and Narnia was reinstated, and the kings and queens of Narnia helped clear the remainder of the White Witch's army from all of Narnia. Yes, it was a time of prosperity, and Narnia was a happy kingdom once again, even in spite of 2 conflicts in 1014, one led by High King Peter against the giants of Ettensmoor, and the other led by Queen Lucy and King Edmund at the Battle of Anvard. After a very full 15 years, in the Narnian year 1015, the Golden Age suddenly came to an end, when the 4 kings and queens of Narnia went on a hunting expedition to find the legendary White Stag and ended up finding their way back through the wardrobe, vanishing from Narnia and returning to our world, never to be seen again by the Narnians of that day. This event ushered in the next era, the Dark Age. The Dark Ages stretched across Narnian history for the next 900 years. During this time, the historical record is astonishingly empty. Only small bits of information are known about this time. We know that in 1050, Ran the Great succeeded Kor as king of Archenland. We also know that in 1502 there was another mention of the appearance of a queen named Swanwhite, which is strange because the original mention of Queen Swanwhite was at least 600 years to 1,000 years earlier. Now there are some interesting theories to explain this discrepancy, but we'll have to save that for another video. Now you might assume that because this era was called the Dark Ages that this was a time of turmoil, strife, depression, or hardship in Narnia, but you'd be mistaken. In fact, the opposite was probably true. As Jewel the Unicorn explains in The Last Battle, there were hundreds and thousands of years when peaceful king followed peaceful king till you could hardly remember their names or count their numbers, and there were really hardly anything to put into history books. It was all because this was a time of such peace that there wasn't much history to record at all. Now all of that would change in the age to come, the Telmarine Age. The Telmarine Age began in the Narnian year 1998 with the Telmarine invasion of Narnia led by Caspian I. Caspian waged a brutal and devastating war against the Narnians. He cut down the trees and defiled the streams, sending the dryads and naiads into deep sleep. He killed fauns and centaurs, and all other talking beasts. And the survivors of this brutal oppression fled into hiding in the uninhabited forests and wildlands. Eventually, Narnia would become exclusively populated by humans, and all the other talking creatures of Narnia would be forgotten, remembered only as myths and legends and fairy tales, except by a very small few. Now during this time, Cair Paravel was abandoned and left to ruin, and a new castle was built for the Telmarine king, in the interior of the country, far from the shores of the Eastern Sea. This was done, it was said, because the Telmarines feared the sea, and perhaps even more, they feared what might come from across the sea. Eventually, the Narnians abandoned the sea completely, and many of the islands in the Narnian Empire were left to be turned over to the unofficial control of pirates and Calormen slave merchants. The age of the Telmarines lasted 305 years, across 9 generations of Caspian kings, until King Caspian IX was assassinated in a silent coup by his brother Muraz. Ironically, it would be the exiled Caspian X who would bring this terrible age to a close. In the Age of Restoration. The Age of Restoration began in the year 2303 during the time of the Narnian Revolution, which was an attempt by the Old Narnians under the leadership of Caspian X to overthrow Muraz and reclaim their homeland. This revolution involved three major battles: the first and second battle of Aslan's How, where the Old Narnians were sorely defeated, and the final deciding conflict known as the Second Battle of Beruna, in which the Old Narnians soundly defeated Muraz and crowned King Caspian X as the true King of Narnia. As a result of this defeat, the talking beasts and the other Old Narnians returned from exile and were given back their homeland. As an act of mercy, the surviving Telmarines were allowed to relocate to our world, and the number of Telmarines in Narnia were greatly reduced. As king, Caspian concentrated his military efforts on restoring stability and security to the Narnian Empire. In the summer of 2304, he secured the northern frontier by defeating the giants which had overrun the country. He rebuilt the Narnian navy and re-established relationships with the islands in the Bight of Calamine. And in 2306, he set off on the famed quest to find the 7 lost lords of Narnia. Along the way, he discovered several new islands in the far eastern sea. He met the daughter of the star who would become Narnia's queen, and he led the first successful expedition in history to reach the world's end, which happened in the year 2307. While most of the Age of Restoration was characterized by great joy and victory, the final decade of this era was marked with sadness. Following the murder of Caspian's beloved queen and the disappearance of his son, both in 2345, Caspian fell under tremendous sadness and stress, which led to premature aging. And just a decade later, at the age of only 67 years old, Caspian had already taken the form of a weak and feeble old man lying on his deathbed. In an act of Aslan's kindness, Caspian had lived to see his long-lost son face to face once again before he took his final breath. And this ended the Age of Restoration and brought in the final era of Narnian history, the Latter Age. The latter ages of Narnia, as one might suspect, were the final years of Narnian history, which began with the coronation of King Rilian and ended during the Telmarine invasion, which culminated at the Battle of Stable Hill in the Narnian year 2555. 7 kings reigned during this era, and during this time, Cair Paravel continued to be rebuilt into a great and thriving city once again. It may be that for a time, more focus was placed on the splendor of the eastern coastal region, because eventually the western lands became wild and unstable, filled with outlaws and criminals. However, in 2534, the 4th king of the age constructed 3 military towers in Lantern Waste to control the outbreak. Eventually, the outbreak was brought under control and Narnian settlements expanded all the way to the western areas of the Cauldron Pool. It was this region that was home to one of the key figures of the final Narnian conflict, a smart and lazy beast whose name was Shift the Ape. As the mastermind behind the false Aslan incident, Shift unknowingly set off a series of significant events in Narnia's last days, including the Great Deception of Tashlan, the Calamine Massacre at Cair Paravel, the arrival of Tash himself, and the last battle at Stable Hill. All of these events led up to the last, most terrible and awesome moment in Narnia's history, Aslan's judgment and the closing up of Narnia. In one final, triumphant act, Aslan called forth Father Time, brought down the stars, flooded the land, and extinguished the sun. And with a final icy blast, the door to Narnia was forever closed. Now, you may think that this is the end of Narnia's history, but you'd be wrong. You see, all that had happened, all of those thousands of years, all of those quests and journeys and battles and victories, they were only the beginning. Because on the other side of that great cosmic door, there was a new Narnia waiting. A Narnia that was more real, more vivid, more full of life than any world that could be imagined. This is the true Narnia. This is Aslan's country. So don't mourn Narnia. After all, as Jill was reminded by Jewel the Unicorn, all worlds draw to an end, except Aslan's own country. And one day, when our world comes to an end as well, we too can look forward to hearing those words. The term is over, the holidays have begun, the dream is ended, this is the morning. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but I want to hear from you. Tell me what you enjoyed about this episode. Tell me if you learned anything new. Tell me if there's anything you'd like to hear in the next episode. And as always, I look forward to seeing you next time as we take another journey into the wardrobe.